I love dark, gritty comic book movies. The Dark Knight, Watchmen, Guardians of the Galaxy even. Logan though? Oh, I want to love this movie. Ultimately, I can't. My expectations for this film were just way too high. The trailer with Johnny Cash singing Hurt was amazing. My name is Jay Shear. I am the host of the Story Geeks podcast and co-founder of the Reclamation Society. And today, I'll be reviewing Logan. First, spoiler-free review. You can stick around if you haven't seen the movie. I'll give you my thoughts. And then I'll give you a spoiler warning and we'll dig a little deeper if you have seen the film. Just some discussion points for us to think about. We always rate things on a scale of quality, story depth, and likelihood to refer. Let's start with quality. Phenomenal fight scenes. Ultra violent, but very well done. This movie is mature. It's rated R for a reason. The acting is fantastic. Patrick Stewart is amazing. The girl who plays Laura is also phenomenal. My brother Cody has noted that Hugh Jackman is probably an early favorite to win the Best Actor in next year's Geek Awards. This film has fantastic acting. Where I start to take points off is in storytelling. The storytelling here leaves something to be desired. And I'm going to dive into that deeper when I get into spoilers, but just know I'm taking off a few points because the storytelling didn't make sense to me. The villains are weak, which is okay because this is a character-driven piece focused on Logan, but it's worth noting. My rating for quality is a 7. Story depth is a 4. Why? Because this is really pretend story depth. Don't be fooled by this. It's dark and gritty, but ultimately it really doesn't deliver, which is a huge bummer because I love this setup. The film setup, the way that it starts is phenomenal. And like I said, the trailer is top notch. Who doesn't want to see a cantankerous, aging Wolverine? Ultimately, this payoff sucks. I could have been satisfied with 2 alternate endings, one on either side of the spectrum, but we get something that's a little bit weaker and in the middle. So I'll jump into that a little bit more in the spoilers. My overall story depth rating, like I said, is a 4, which is a pretty poor rating, and I wish it could be higher. Which means my likelihood to refer is also really low because we are all about deep stories here at the Reclamation Society, and I love it when comic book movies and sci-fi films and fantasy films take that extra step and get into that depth, but this didn't. My likelihood to refer, also 4. If you love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, this movie is worth watching. It is a very good portrayal of Wolverine. There's no question about that. If you're a geek who loves comics like me, let's face it, you're probably going to watch this. Would I recommend it? Can't really recommend it this time around. That's my review. Now let's get into some spoilers. So if you haven't seen Wolverine and you don't want these spoilers, tune out. The first complaint that's deeper about this movie that I have that relates to the story depth is Logan's character development. He's almost the same character in the beginning of the film as he is in the end of the film. The story wants us to believe that he's going to develop even more. The story could have shown on one side the immense pain of living life for oneself, living selfishly, especially when you've dealt with tragedy. That's similar to how The Watchmen ends, people dealing with human nature being a very negative thing. We could have seen that life is difficult and being a hero is hard. I would have been okay with that. I would have loved it though if Logan would have made some major sacrifice at the end of the film and truly redeemed himself, given up of himself in order to save other people. We don't really get that either. What do we get though? We get Logan giving up the cash. He was supposed to receive some cash. The children even offer him the cash and he gives it back to them. Here's the problem with that. That's not really much of a sacrifice. He's dying. Professor X is already dead, and he doesn't really need money for anything. His whole plan of going and taking a ship and escaping humanity, he doesn't need that, he's gonna die. Him giving up that cash is not really much of a sacrifice. especially since he's giving it to kids who are on the run and who probably will need that cash at some point in time. Him giving up that is not a major choice, and it shouldn't really be that difficult to do. The second thing is he saves the kids. Now, you'd say to me, doesn't he redeem himself by doing this selfless act to save the kids? To a certain extent, yes, but again, that's where this movie is a little bit weak. This guy is dying. What kind of a dirtbag hero would not save these kids? These are kids on the run. They're in trouble. They need help. And he's dying. He's going to die anyways. His character journey to become less selfish in the end just lacks the punch that I think that it could have had. Logan gets this minor pseudo redemption that really doesn't do much for me. Here's the biggest thing, right? At least he could have been encouraging to his sort of daughter. He could have encouraged her in a way to live life that was different from him, except he didn't really do that either. There's a couple of lines that he gives to her that are probably helpful to her in her life, but those lines overall tend to be a little weak. Here's my biggest problem with the film. The trailer ruined the movie for me. It set an expectation that the film probably couldn't live up to. Johnny Cash singing Hurt is brilliant. It's a song about the regret that someone harbors about the hurt they've caused themselves and others. What a perfect setup for Logan as an old cantankerous man who's left being a superhero behind. But the song doesn't end there. The song goes on to say, in the key line, "If I could start again 1,000,000 miles away, I would keep myself. I would find a way." That would be Wolverine's redemption. How? Because he passes that along to Laura. Wolverine has the opportunity in this film. There is basically a young little him in the character of Laura who is still developing and who's already faced some significant problems in her life. His redemption is basically passing along to her some wisdom so that she will not repeat the same mistakes that he's made that have driven him to this life. He could implore her, he could love her, he could tell her what not to do that he did. And we basically get a couple throwaway lines where he gives her a little bit of advice, but none of that comes to the same level of Johnny Cash singing Hurt. And ultimately, that is a major disconnect for me. And it's ultimately why I don't like this film. Now, you could argue back to me that you think the redemption was good enough. You could say that it was within his character, and I'd give you points for those arguments. But for me, I would have either liked to see him not really be redeemed or full redemption. What I got was wishy-washy for me at best. I do think that this film asks some deep questions that we want to consider. So I'm going to throw these questions out to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. One, how do we pass along a legacy to the next generation? How do we implore them not to repeat our mistakes? What could Wolverine have done to show and prove to Laura that she could not have to repeat the same life and end up like he ended up at the end of his life? Two, how do we protect our kids from extreme violence? And if they become violent like Laura has, how do we help them recover from that? Three, what are the consequences of our actions? What will be negative consequences or positive consequences to us acting like a hero or us acting like a villain? Us being selfish or us being selfless? Finally, what does redemption truly look like for us and our lives? And how can we be redeemed? That is a major question that I think the film tries to answer, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how they did. That's it for me. I've ranted for long enough. Am I crazy? Maybe I missed something that you saw that you want to tell me about and prove to me that I'm wrong. That would be awesome. Let me know in the comments below. Obviously, my opinion is not a popular one. People love this movie. Leave me a comment in regards to what you would like for me to review next. As always, question everything in your favorite stories. Always.